This workshop was recorded in Long Beach, California on Saturday, the 3rd day of August of the year 2019.
Hello. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody out in the hallway. I went to one of your seminars almost 23 years ago in San Antonio when we used to go to Esther's house afterwards, so it is truly good to see you again. Last time I was up here...
Still go to Esther's house occasionally. 400 last time.
I would definitely recommend going if you get the chance. Last time I was up here, as you know, my life is good and I've been super blessed. And you were telling me to...
Everyone's super blessed.
Yes.
That's not the issue.
I've been lucky enough to allow it in.
How much of the blessing that's raining down around you are you focused in and aware of, letting in, translating into manifested, obvious things? Yeah.
And so you had talked about baking the cake, and you said a lot of what I had done was really between me and Source, or me and God, and you're saying co-creation with other people could probably really take me to the next level and really be enjoyable, but you have to, you bump around with people more, so you have to maintain your connection and maintain...
Co-creating with others is wonderful because it is such an expansive experience, but it is helpful if you're solid in your own connection before you bump around with them, because sometimes well-meaning people will, from your perspective, you'll become under their influence rather than under the influence of your source, and then those relationships are usually strained and temporary.
And so two, I guess, questions. One, it's been fantastic the last 2 years as old friends have come back into my life and we've created some amazing things together. And then there's been more contrast with some other people, some family members that we've just bumped into each other more aggressively.
Does it feel like step 1 contrast or step 5 contrast?
They feel like step 5, yeah.
Well, good stuff then.
Yeah. And so it's been fun, this process of
You use
co-creation.
the word aggressive, however, which
Yes.
sounds a little step 1-ish.
Well, they feel similar, it's just whether or not you move.
No, they do not feel similar.
Really?
Really.
Okay, good.
Step 5 contrast feels like variety and choices. Step 1 contrast feels like obstacles and discomfort. Step 5 is what your inner being feels like when you're in contrast. Step 1 is what humans usually feel like when they're not under the influence of inner being, when they're in contrast.
Got it, okay. Then more step 1.
Step 5 contrast is like, bring it on. That was so clarifying. I didn't even really know I wanted that. I'm so much more clear about who I am. I feel richer and broader and more expansive. I have an eagerness for life now that I didn't have before this contrast. It's renewed something in me. I'm so happy that there's something more for me to attract. That's step 5 contrast. Step 1 contrast is, are you kidding me?
So the term I had used before was stuck in my joy, and in this process, I've had way more step 5 moments where I'm like, I didn't even know that I could get even more happy and have more enjoyment in life. And I've had more step 1 moments that have been more contrast serving of going,
You know
that's
what,
interesting.
though? Having a step 1 moment and knowing you're having one is a good thing, not a bad thing. And a series of step 1 moments makes you desire or throw rockets of desire into your vortex. A series of step 1 moments makes you decide you're going to get out ahead of it and you're going to have more step 5 moments than step 1 moments. A series of step 1 moments makes you realize that you're taking it all too seriously. You're being too hard on yourself. And usually, if you're having a lot of step 1 moments, usually it means you're still trying to control the perspective of others, which you cannot do. You cannot control how others are viewing you. You just can't do it. And when you finally give that up, you're free.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that goes to the question of...
goes exactly to the question.
It's almost like you knew, almost. It's almost like you knew what I was going to ask. Which is if you have some level of... And I know what you're going to say when I use this term, and so I'm trying to say it lightly, but if you have some level of standards of what you find acceptable, and for me, when I tend to get more bothered by when somebody does something to somebody I care about than if somebody does something to me, if that makes sense.
It does, but
Okay. It's both bad.
what you just said is, my belief system makes me believe that it's virtuous to put up with stuff when it's directed at me, but I'm more diligent and vigilant about it when it's towards someone else, because my belief system says that being a protector is a good thing and being a coper is a good thing too. So I can cope with the injustice and the unfairness, but don't do it to somebody else, or don't do it to somebody I love. And you're right, none of it is in alignment, but these are all the books that the humans have been writing. At the heart of this, we'll be very brief here because you're on the brink of something really worth discussing, but at the heart of this is a basic belief that goes like this: society, or segments of society, or teachers, or parents, or just humans in general, what they say to others is, you should not be selfish. And it's just such a ridiculous statement, because what they're actually saying is, it's my selfishness or yours, and I choose mine, not yours. So they're not against the concept of selfishness, because they can't stop perceiving and desiring for things to please them. They're just against you getting what you want. If somebody has to win, it should be me, is what almost everybody is saying. And that competition is what's keeping most people from the joy that they deserve, because it doesn't have to be that way. From your inner being's point of view, everyone can win. You're not in competition for resources. When you pinch yourself off from resources, they didn't take them from you. You did. You just weren't under the influence of the resources. You were under the influence of the lack of the resources. And when you're under the influence of the lack of the resources, then you squabble with one another over the resources, and you judge them for getting more than their fair share of a non-existent pie. But when you are consistently tuned in and you realize that the universe is yielding to whoever tunes into it whatever they want, then you're joyful when others get what they want. Let's break this down, because this is really a leading edge conversation. This all sort of sounded like we were talking about resources, like who's getting the cars and who's getting the pies and who's getting the money, and people do squabble over that and feel jealous over that. There's nothing that makes you feel more the lack of you getting something you want than to see somebody else getting exactly what you want. Esther remembers Tracy. She was just out of high school, and she wanted a new red car. It was a beautiful, beautiful car. And she figured out how to accomplish it. She had enough earning, and they said no, 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 no. And Jerry wouldn't help her, which made her really mad at him. But she figured it out, and she got her car. And the car wheels were not touching the road for a long time. The car just hovered just above the road. She was so happy in that car. And one day she went back to her apartment in San Antonio, and she called her mother crying because there was a man eating out of the dumpster in her parking lot. And she felt so bad that she had this beautiful car and he was eating out of the dumpster. And Esther said, well, honey, do you think if you didn't have that car that he wouldn't be eating out of the dumpster? And she said, oh, yeah, they're not related, are they? Because the abundance is streaming down, and people are letting it in or not letting it in. And your opportunity to assist others in letting it in is through the clarity of your example of letting it in, not by your withholding it from yourself and walking around as an example of somebody who doesn't let it in. And so it sounds like we're talking about the competition for the stuff, and to some extent we are, because there is no competition. But what we're really talking about is, am I under the influence of source, or am I under the influence of something else? Am I allowing what's in my vortex to flow with ease into my experience, or am I blocking it off and preventing it from coming because of beliefs that I am holding that just aren't letting it in? That is the singular question to ask yourself on a moment-to-moment basis.
So I want to try to hit this with as light a touch as possible because life is good and these happen rarely for me. But this process of maybe I don't have kids, so maybe that's a good example. So if you have children and your kid really wants to do something, I was at the pool.
Oh, you don't have kids, then you can't possibly know.
I know.
You can't possibly know the struggle that people with children are living. We're just playing.
I know, but people say that.
We know. And it bothers you.
That does bother me, yes.
Yeah, you got to get over that.
Okay.
Because what number of children should I have? 1? 27? When you start playing that game of making yourself feel better because you're sensitive to people who are critical of you, what you discover is they're fickle and they're only looking at you for a moment, and they're not a good thing to measure yourself against. It's fleeting, and it never has anything to do with you. It's always their stuff.
So I guess for me the final question is when you're bumping into people, and let's use kids as an example, and I saw these kids that really wanted to stay at the pool and their parents wanted to take them home because they needed to go home. The kids weren't super happy about it. I've heard you say something like, the kids are so aligned to source, and this is crazy, but do you let the kids stay at the pool while you go home, or do you do you understand what I'm saying? How do you make that sort of?
Well, so since you don't have kids, you don't have a problem.
I know.
So from your perspective, here's the way we would stay in alignment about this. We would acknowledge that all of them, parents and children, are having a step one moment because they have a disagreement about what they want. And since they've hooked themselves together and they believe that they must have the identical experience of either all being there or all going someplace else, it's very convoluted. You couldn't get to the bottom of that if you spent all day talking with all of them about, in other words, you could tell the children that you need to be considerate of your parents, and you could tell the parents you need to be more considerate of your children, and you could tell the parents they're tuned in, tapped in, turned on, they're having a good time, you're old fuddy-duddies, why don't you get tuned in, tapped in, turned on? It could go round and round and round and round, and you would never find any resolution about it. So what do you do in a situation like that? You ask yourself, am I having a step 5 moment or a step 1 moment? If you're having a step 5 moment, then as you're acknowledging that, you're acknowledging that they're having contrast that is serving every one of them. You know that these kids are launching rockets of desire, and you also might acknowledge that none of them are under the influence of source. All of them are disconnected from source. Therefore, all of them are feeling the pinch of being disconnected, is too strong a word, but pinched off from it. And every one of them is blaming the other one for the way they feel, which is going to get them nowhere. So what you acknowledge is this is a step 1 moment that they are all having, and I'm having a step 5 moment as I'm observing them having a step 1 moment. Unless you've got something stuck in your vibrational craw and it's activating all those times you didn't get to stay at the pool, and it's bringing up for you all of the injustices because while you don't have kids, you were a kid.
Yeah, sure.
So it gives you an opportunity to know if you've got something stuck in your vibrational craw, which you don't need to have now. Understanding the laws of the universe can free you from all of that just by acknowledging, am I under the influence of my inner being or under the influence of something else?